Welcome to Season 7 of Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. In this show, we talk to leaders of clubs and interesting folks who live in and around the villages. We also talk to people who have information vital to seniors. You will get perspectives of what is happening in the Villages, Florida area. We are a listener-supported podcast. There will be shout-outs for supporters.
This is Mike Roth on Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. I'm here today with a very special person, Judge Michael Takac. Michael, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Let me tell our listeners a little bit about your background. Michael Takac is now in his fourth term serving as a state of Florida Fifth Circuit judge. The Fifth Circuit covers all of Lake, Sumter, Marion, Citrus, and Hernando counties. Judge Takac has handled cases within every division of a circuit judge's assignment. Previously, Judge Takac served as a senior assistant attorney general for the state of Florida and as an assistant general counsel to the executive office of the governor. In private practice, he handled trials and appeals across the state of Florida. Literally, from Pensacola to the Keys, Judge Takac grew up in New Jersey, graduated from Ocala Vanguard High School and Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Michael, how long have you worked for the Florida court system?
As a judge, let me respond to that by saying I've been working as a circuit judge. I'm in my 19th year. Prior to that, I've worked as an attorney, so that puts me in the court system, obviously. I became licensed way back in 1987. So I've been working in the court system since in one capacity or another.
For our listeners who might not be familiar with the circuit court system in the state of Florida, why don't you give us a brief rundown on what the circuit court system does?
Circuit court is the level of trial court that handles the more expensive cases, more serious crimes. So everything above $50,000 is in circuit court. Family law, divorces, juvenile delinquency, things like that are in circuit court. Same thing with felony crimes, which is any crime punishable by more than a year.
So would that mean that most traffic accident cases would be in circuit courts?
The trial level below would be county court. So if you run over a mailbox, you may be in county court. If you hit somebody else's vehicle, you're in circuit court.
Okay. And about how many cases a year do you handle?
That can vary year to year because some years people are ready to get to trial, other years are more quiet. There's generally 1,000 at least active cases assigned to every circuit judge.
Wow, that's every circuit judge. And how many circuit judges are there?
Well, in the Fifth Circuit, we have 31. We're about to go up to 32 or 3. They just approved a couple new ones.
Do you have a favorite type of case that you like to handle?
Experience has taught me over time that looking back, I think the delinquency court cases are the most rewarding. If I were younger in my term, I would say it's hard to denote a favorite because everybody that comes to court, whatever their case is, it's very important to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not fair really to try to distinguish a favorite. But in juvenile cases, now I've been on the bench long enough and have done them long enough ago that it's very rewarding to have people come up to you and say, you don't remember me or you don't know who I am, do you? But I was in your circuit court. You said something and really turned me around. I'm doing that. And I've had that happen a nice handful of times where it's quite rewarding. It's better than the other scenario where, one party leaves maybe satisfied, the other party leaves totally disgusted. Sometimes on a good day, they both leave disgusted.
Yeah. There's a big difference between being the judge and being an attorney. And could you tell us from your experience what the difference is?
What I would tell you is an attorney works as an advocate. And that's very rewarding. The right cause, the right client. There's a lot of interest there. It's a very rewarding experience. To some extent, as a judge, you have to sacrifice that. You have to treat things equal and come in. You have to put your bias and prejudice aside. It can be a conscious decision you have to make. But I think if you're doing it right, the distance that you have to give a case, instead of seeking right and wrong, treating both parties the same to make sure they both have their fair forum to have their dispute decided.
Mm-hmm. As a judge, have you ever been involved in cases where you were unhappy with what the jury verdict was?
I don't think I'd use the word unhappy. I think maybe you've been surprised by a verdict. Maybe one will be a little bit higher than you thought or less than it was, but you're really not unhappy about it. And the work, I think, if you're doing the job right, that really doesn't come into play.
What do you think people in general should know about the real world jury system as opposed to the one that we've seen on TV and movies?
First of all, it's a more linear process and a slower process than what you see on TV. TV likes the back and forth to build suspense and drama. There's a specific order in court, and it takes the evidence a little bit slower to get it out before it gets tied up at the end. The other thing is that juries, they tend to get it right, in my opinion. I've been a judge for, like I said, over 19 years. If I had a dispute, I'd much rather a jury decide it than a judge.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of juries for a second, are most juries always 12 people?
No, it's actually most juries are 6. The only time you have a 12-member jury is if you're taking a human life or if you're taking property. So that's an eminent domain case or condemnation. When the government has to widen a road, they'll impanel a jury of 12 to decide what the compensation should be. If the death penalty is at issue for a criminal defendant, then it's a jury of 12. Everybody else has 6, and there's usually at least an alternate or 2.
In case someone gets sick.
That's it as well.
Mm-hmm. How familiar are you with what's happening down here in the villages?
As far as it growing by leaps and bounds and supplying great places to go eat and stuff like that, I'm very familiar with that. I can tell you my experience with the villages when I was in high school in Ocala. The villages wasn't even a village. It was a cow pasture as far as you could see. And it was a great shortcut to get from Ocala to the airport in Orlando. Not so anymore.
Down 301.
Yeah, so I've watched the villages become the villages, and it's quite something to see. It's really the story of Florida, and this is just the way Florida's always been built up. This is the Central Florida version and focused on being a retirement community as opposed to maybe a tourist attraction.
Yeah. My understanding is that the villages could never become a city because of the way it's been developed.
That's a little bit complicated question there that the only thing you ever know is that you never know. I'll leave it at that. I don't have any insight to the villages even wanting to become a city. I would say in Florida, you're better off not being a city because if you're in the city limits, then you're taxed twice because the municipalities, which is what we call them in Florida, they have an ability to tax you as well as counties.
Right. We have a whole bunch of people in Wildwood like that.
Right.
And Wildwood's probably one of the most interesting cities in the villages because it was 8,000 people before the villages, and now they're over 35,000 people.
Wildwood, Lady Lake, I mean, it's huge.
I don't know if Lady Lake's been demographically changed by the villages, but Wildwood certainly has. They still have the same 8,000 residents in the original part of the city, but they got 32,000.
It was a rural country high school back in the 80s, I can tell you that.
It was, yeah. Now they're taking cow pastures and turning them into villages.
It's all rooftops now, not the backside of a cattle.
Yeah, going all the way down to Bushnell.
It's down. I live a little bit south of the villages, and I think the villages may eventually get to me. I know they're right on the border of 48 in Lake County. It's grown quite a bit.
Yeah, Lake County has been very favorable for the development of the villages as well. I'm only sorry that they didn't build the hospital that they were supposed to there.
That part I don't know about. I'm not involved in the planning of it, but there's a lot of growth there. There's some new hospitals relocated in different areas. That's outside my expertise.
Sure. Let's talk about something that is inside your expertise in terms of cases and judgments. Do you think that the tort system in Florida for accidents, personal injury, has gotten totally out of control?
It depends. If I don't think I could say it's out of control. It's my job to try to control it, make sure everybody gets a fair trial if it gets to that. Some of what you see is frankly driven by what happens outside the courts. It's a business, and everybody has to have insurance, and insurance can control what happens on those cases.
I just saw an email come through today before you came down to the studio from Morgan & Morgan of how they won 3 cases for more than $10 million each.
Advertising can be a little bit interesting, but my role, and I think the role of a judge is what I told people even during my campaign, is that my job is to enforce and apply the law. And if the law's terrible, I apply it because maybe my role is to say, make everybody aware of it. And if you think that's what's happening shouldn't happen, you have to take that to Tallahassee and get the legislature to fix it. There have been different things and tweaks here and there. Overall, I think when you have good evidence that you put in front of a jury, I think those 6 people tend to take their job serious, try to weigh the evidence, and generally they'll do a good job on that. That's partly why I like speaking in the villages, because you are free to be excused from jury duty if you'd like, but it is not required. So if you have hit the retirement age, if you want to serve, you can. What better way to get a grip on a system maybe that you think is getting broken than participating in it and be part of the cure to make sure that problem doesn't rise to that.
That's an interesting perspective. I think it's if you're over 65, you can say, I don't want to be on a jury.
70, you're automatically disqualified.
What about,
well, you're free to choose to be exempt, but you don't have to.
So in your experience as a judge, what percentage of the people that come in for jury duty to be examined by the lawyers get tossed out?
A bigger percentage get tossed out than come in. I know because you're always allowing extra jury summons. Their summons random. And if you're wondering how they do it used to be voter registration. There was a big shift some years ago. They've gone to driver's license. So it's just random draw of driver's license. And if you don't drive, then it's state issued ID. So that's the pool from which your name gets pulled out of. And it has to be random. And you're always allowing for reasonable disqualifications that anybody would agree should be granted. For instance, if you come down and on the week you're selected, you've had a vacation plan, you have a procedure plan, you're going to be excused. I don't know any judge that's going to keep you through that. If you know, obviously, one of the parties, one of the lawyers, you'll be excluded. And then the law provides for certain exclusions that the parties can use. So you always have a much bigger pool. And so quite frankly, if you're summoned to jury duty, you may be inconvenienced for a Monday morning, possibly all day, but it's more likely that you'll be excused. And then for coming down and having participated in the process, we generally give you a lengthy excusal just for giving us that Monday. I know down in Lake County, when I have a pool, I like to say, well, we'll automatically make sure you have a year off, because you hear some people never get summoned. And then once they're summoned, it's like, now I've been summoned 3 times. So
well, that used to happen in Ohio. My wife used to get summoned a lot. And when in Ohio, as an independent business owner, I would write that down on the certificate, and I never actually had to show up.
Certainly financial hardship generally will get you excused from coming down, especially a few years ago. The economy was really, really tough.
So if you got a jury pool with, people that are over 70 years of age that have volunteered to come in, what percentage of those over 70-year-olds will be eliminated by the 2 attorneys?
Well, they won't. I don't know that anybody's ever broken that down on percentage, but I will tell you, they won't take volunteers. It's random draw because somebody may complain the system's set up to be random draw. So it's not like you have to go down there and wait. But if you do get your name pulled, there's right on the summons that you get, there'll be a checkbox. If you're over 70, you can check the box.
No, people over 70.
You won't have to bother it at all. But if you're willing to come down.
Let's say 100 people over 70 showed up. With the attorneys?
I don't think there's a pattern I could tell you.
You haven't seen it?
No, because some attorneys, I think, if you're going to be there, the first thing they want to make sure is you're going to pay attention to the case, or at least, a good attorney would. And if you're retired and you're told them you're there, you don't mind being there, they may not worry about you paying the case. There are other instances where, maybe if people think they're preoccupied, different attorneys, like all humans, have different quirks, different things they look at. I'm not telling you there's not an attorney who would say, I want 20-year-olds, not 50-year-olds.
Yeah, because the defendant is 20 years old.
I guess I could give you this percentage. If you're bringing 10 attorneys, you'll probably get 10 different opinions.
Oh, okay.
So on what they would think of a 70-year-old juror, I think most attorneys just have to be happy with it. I got 6 in the box that are paying attention.
Good.
That's really all you can ask for.
Let's take a short break and listen to an Alzheimer's tip from Dr. Craig Curtis.
So even if you removed 100% of the amyloid, that would not cure Alzheimer's. That is true in patients with symptoms. You can remove all the amyloid, yet the symptoms will continue to progress. So what we're doing now in these prevention studies is we're trying to see if removing amyloid prior to symptoms beginning, if removing all the amyloid out of your brain, whether or not that actually halts the progression into actual symptoms in Alzheimer's disease.
With over 20 years of experience studying brain health, Dr. Curtis's goal is to educate the Villages community on how to live a longer, healthier life. To learn more, visit his website, craigcurtismd.com, or call 352-500-5252 to attend a free seminar.
Thank you, Dr. Curtis. So Alzheimer's and dementias are something that has always interested me. Is there any kind of a test that you give to prospective jurors to find out if they've got all of their noodles?
When there's an allegation, you're talking about really being in guardianship.
Well, guardianship will be...
And I've had that assignment. So when it's suspected that somebody might have memory problems, Alzheimer, where they need help, they're recommended to, they get an exam, and it's a professional will look at it and come back, and you'll get that report filed into court. Sometimes when people come in, you'll ask them a few questions. Do you know why you're here? There's not a specific legislatively designed test. In Florida, we have a lot of elderly and retirees, so
Sure.
That's a big part of the law that I think the legislature pays attention to, and so you'll be examined by a committee.
No. So you don't give a juror a short-term memory test?
Juror, no. Jurors aren't.
Prospective jurors, short-term memory tests?
Prospective jurors are not tested at all. They engage in the process of voir dire. I've heard it pronounced. It's a French phrase, VOIR space DIRE. I think it's the French way. The translation is to speak the truth. And you are asked questions. First, and if you're in a trial in my courtroom, I'll ask a handful of questions first and then turn it over to the parties. They'll each have a lawyer that will ask you questions. Things like, have you ever driven here? Have you ever been arrested? And there again, if you get 10 attorneys, you'll get 10 different answers on what they like to ask. They're looking for your background experience. I like to have jurors stand up and introduce themselves first, so the juries get the lay of the land. Sometimes they might be afraid of accountants, insurance adjusters, things like that.
Do you have the jurors announce their own names?
Absolutely. You're in a
on
courtroom.
TV. You never see that.
No. The hard part of picking a jury probably doesn't make good television. Although I guess you could make a show about that. But you're asking questions. You're asking people to be candid about what other feelings they think they might not be able to put aside, what their prejudices would be. And they're very, candid in disclosing that. And if people have a reason that everybody realizes they shouldn't sit, you can disqualify them. That's called a challenge for cause. And many jurors are happy to get out of there. Many people in the court on a Monday are looking to get out of there on a challenge for cause.
As the judge, do you ever dismiss a juror?
Oh, we let people go all the time. We have the way it works is there's a rotation of when you get summons, you'll send back your note with maybe an excuse or why you think you should be excused. And when you're the duty judge or have been assigned to jury duty for the month, it's your job to read the excuses and decide who comes down and who doesn't. Then there's the whole process of then you show up on Monday and make sure you're in the right county, you're not the governor or a member of the cabinet, that you meet the citizen requirements to be a juror. And that morning, we'll entertain some excuses again. If anybody feels like this is a hardship, we'll take them. Sometimes my mother got sick, I got to go tend to her, and we'll get those excuses.
If someone comes in and they're coughing?
Coughing, no. Usually a doctor's note if you're ill and you need a doctor's note. But sometimes you could look at somebody. If their eyes are teary and they can't get their name out, you may just as well send them home so you don't have a room full of sick jurors. But there's the initial mail-in process. There's the process when you first get there Monday morning. And then you go to the courtroom, and there's a third opportunity that you'll be excused when the lawyers ask questions. For instance, somebody may have a conflict only on Thursday, and many criminal trials go less than a day, so you can tell the jury pool, fine, we'll make sure that your trial is a Monday, Tuesday deal. And then sometimes, they'll come up into the courtroom, and the attorneys will say, we think we'll be done Thursday, or no, we won't, so they'll excuse the person.
Okay. For long trials.
The going rate right now, I like to tease attorneys all the time, is you asked about traffic accidents, so any tort case like that, the personal injury cases, the going rate right now is 5 days.
Really?
Everybody likes to ask for a week on those type trials. which means the jury would be picked Monday, and by Friday we expect them to be deliberating and return their verdict.
What percentage of the juries go longer on deliberations?
That varies from jury to jury. Usually once they get the evidence, they get it turned around pretty quick. Most of if we can get a jury to deliberate by Friday at lunchtime, they'll usually be done by Friday evening. Sometimes it could be trial driven. Some of your more complicated trials may go for several weeks, so you expect they may take a little bit more time to examine the evidence. I find juries to be a little bit more efficient turning around their decision than sometimes the lawyers are laying it out and presenting it to them. And maybe I should say we as lawyers are in giving it to them.
Is there a difference in time for deliberations between a 6-person jury and a 12-person jury?
In theory, no, there's not a time limit. The thing we ask them to do is to their first assignment, they all have to sit there individually, take their notes and go. And before we send the jury back to deliberate, we ask them to go ahead and pick the 4-person who try to chair it. And the instructions usually suggest that you let everybody speak their opinion and then decide where you go from there. How long that process takes, that's as individual as the 6 or 12 people you get back there. It can be very efficient. And
what's the best jury, the fastest one you've ever had?
Usually if you have a jury come back in less than an hour, that's usually a criminal type case. You get something like that. When I was a trial attorney, I did a lot of eminent domain cases, which were 12-member juries. They usually, took a few hours, but sometimes they can come back quick too. It depends on the property. I've had trials that are multiple properties, multiple businesses. That jury sits out there for hours, as you might anticipate. One, maybe single residential property, maybe not so much.
What's the longest jury deliberation you've experienced?
I've had one go pretty much an entire couple of days, but I've never had anybody sit out a week and deliberate. Those kind of juries, sometimes maybe there's a deadlock because all jury verdicts have to be unanimous. And then there's charges that you can give them to help break that deadlock so you don't have to do the trial over again.
What do you mean by charges?
The charge is just a jury instruction.
So, for instance,
you get a note. Let's say you send a jury out and they come back in an hour and say, Judge, we're deadlocked. We want to go home. You'll say,
3-3.
Yeah, look, this is we don't even ask for the vote because it has to be unanimous. So they'll come back and say, we can't reach a decision. And usually the first charge or the first jury instruction to them at that time would be pretty innocuous. Please go back and try again, work a little bit harder, and then we'll talk about it. And usually there's several and they can escalate up. Sometimes a jury will have a question. We need something read back to us. So when you get involved with that, that's obviously a longer deliberation. I've never had people sit out for weeks at a time. I've never had a sequestered jury. That's rare,
And since you've been a circuit court judge in how many years? 19 years?
Yeah, I'm in my 19th year, I think, at the end of this year.
In 19 years, you've never had a sequestered
Never had a sequestered jury. People ordinarily don't want to be sequestered, so they, they get to go home in the evenings, comforted. When you have a jury, you want to make it as comfortable for them as possible because they're the linchpin. That's what makes, in my opinion, that's what makes the country great. That's what makes us so different from everybody else. You're not getting your case decided by somebody special. It's just 6 ordinary people just like you. And that's why we really try to show our appreciation when you come to the courthouse, remind people of that. The wonderful thing is if, heaven forbid, you need a jury, you should have a legal question that would need one. It relies on people performing their civic duties. So to the extent people are willing to do that, we're all grateful. And it seems to work because, like I said, more often than not, it's very rare that a jury will do something even that's surprising.
What percentage of jury verdicts are appealed in your purview?
Somebody knows the answer to that. I don't know what the raw percentage, that might vary year to year.
Take a guess.
But I would tell you that the statistics we pay more attention to is appeals have, less than 50-50 chance of prevailing usually. So as a judge, that's more what I'm worried about, of how many of my appeals have come back. So not every case is appealed. A lot of cases, somebody will get appealed, but you have to have certain particular grounds for it. And if you've run the trial correctly, a lot of times it's just, that's what the jury said. People feel like they've had their day in court. They're not necessarily automatically looking to appeal.
Earlier you said about 1,000 cases a year per judge.
Well, that's how many you have handled actively.
Okay. So
they're not all resolved within a year. And
okay. So you have 1,000 cases. Of the 1,000 cases, what percentage would be settled by a pre-trial agreement, but which a long shot means.
By a long shot, I mean maybe 80, 90%.
Wow, that high.
So, a lot of cases settle. And then, now keep in mind of that 1,000, there's also different type of cases. I'm not doing only jury trials. I right now also take on the domestic relations docket, which are divorces, child custody, things like that. And even those, more cases settle than not. Sometimes it takes getting it into court and then making parties aware of what the law is, what it allows, what you can do. And then now, how do your facts apply to the law? For instance, in a divorce case, sometimes you can tell people, I can't give anybody $1 million alimony if as a couple all you ever made was $10,000.
Yeah, sure. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, sometimes you have to,
Sometimes people don't want to believe in making sense. So let's wrap up here, Mike. Can you give our listeners one tip if they ever run into the legal system?
Well, I think the most misunderstood right, but most oft repeated, is the right to remain silent. The world would be a better place if more of us exercise that right to just be quiet and listen.
Really?
So that would be my tip. The right to remain silent. Don't abuse that one. It can go a long way to keeping things happy.
Great. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions, please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout out for supporters: Tweet Coleman, Ed Williams, Duane Romish, Paul Sorgan, and Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. The way our show grows is with your help. Text your friends about this show if you enjoyed listening, or just tell your friends about the show. We thank everyone for listening. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2025. All rights reserved.